All right, I want you guys to picture with me now. It's Thanksgiving, or if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner. And you and your whole family are there together. There's so much food. There's turkey and mashed potatoes and or whatever you guys eat for a big meal. And you have all this food on your plate and you're so excited. You sit down and you just want to eat it. But wait, you can't. You have to sit and wait for everybody else to sit down, but then still you have to come together and first say grace. Now, maybe your family practices this tradition, or maybe they don't, but essentially saying grace or giving the blessing or giving thanks, whatever you might call it, involves a group of people coming together and praying to God before they eat a meal. This prayer usually starts with thanksgiving, and then goes into blessing the food, whatever that means. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. And then it might involve praying about some other things or just ending right there, depending on how hungry the person praying is. But that is pretty much where the similarities end. You see, saying grace looks so different depending on what family is doing it or where in the world you are. Over the years, this tradition has evolved and maybe devolved into many different forms. I had a friend in university who, when he went to pray, would literally just go, that's all he did, just that gesture of, and that was his prayer before he ate his food. And also, when I worked at summer camp, we used to sing these ridiculous prayer songs, like ones that were themed after Superman or Jaws or the Addams Family, if you even know what that is. I had another friend who had this tradition of praying where everybody would put their hands flat together, and throughout the prayer would slowly raise them up, and the prayer would get louder and louder until the prayer was over and everybody would clap their hands over their head. I even knew a pastor who, I kid you not, would say one prayer at the start of every year for all the food he was gonna eat that year. I'm not joking. And then even aside from these silly examples, there's also lots of other weird things families might do or rules they might have with it. Like, most people and families don't pray or bless their food if they're only eating by themselves. Most families won't pray or bless a food if they're eating in front of the TV, only when they're at the table. Most families only pray during supper together, even if they eat other meals together. So with all this, maybe you're thinking, wow, Mr. Miles doesn't like the tradition of saying grace. Wow, how dramatic. No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I actually, quite the opposite, love the tradition of saying grace. I love this tradition because of the common core element that is there and present in all of these examples and even the silly ones. And that is that it causes us to stop, to not do what we might really want to do, and instead be thankful for the grace of God and everything that He's done for us. I love this tradition because it's all about starting with what's most important. It's all about starting with saying grace. So today we're going to be talking about grace, God's grace, and why it's so important to start with. So today's scripture is going to be Romans 5, verses 6 to 10 in the New Living Translation. And it goes like this. When we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed His great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. And since we have been made right in God's sight by the blood of Christ, He will certainly save us from God's condemnation. For since our friendship with God was restored by the death of His Son while we were still His enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of His Son. You see, Paul here is writing to a church in Rome, to the Roman new Christians who don't really understand the whole big picture surrounding Jesus and what He did for us. Here, throughout the book, Paul describes what God did for us, what the gospel is, and what it means to us, and why it's important in our lives. And this passage is a super crucial, a super important part of that. It's going at the foundation of what our faith is. That foundation being God's grace to us. Saying that how we were sinners, that we did all these things and spat in the face of God, but while we were still sinners and hadn't even apologized or sought restitution with God, God sent his son for us and died for us. Again, while we were still sinners, and gave us this amazing gift of salvation. Grace means for us to get what we don't deserve. And there can be no greater example than when we as people deserved the absolute worst, but instead God gave us the greatest gift imaginable. And that is what Paul is trying to communicate. He's trying to say that at the core of our belief is the principle that we didn't deserve anything. We didn't work for anything. We were given this gift of grace, of salvation, when we deserved not a lick of it. And today that is still true. Grace is as much the foundation of our faith now as it was back then, 2,000 years ago. We first accept Jesus in our lives by understanding and accepting this concept. That's how crucial it is. So what, does this mean that we just accept and understand this grace when we first bring Jesus into our lives? When we first become a Christian? And then that's it? No. You see, we need to have grace, God's grace, at the front of our minds constantly, all the time. We can't just start with grace when we first become a Christian. We need to start with grace constantly, all the time, in everything we do. In order to start right, we need to start with grace. And that is our main point. That in order to start right, we need to start with grace. Because how we start things matters. We start things all the time. We start a new day 7 times a week. We start a new week 4 times a month. We start a new meal 3 to 4 times a day. We start submitting our work late on Google Classroom all the time. So with all of these things that we're starting all the time, we need to be doing them well, which means we need to be starting them well, which means we need to be starting them by saying grace. Wait, Mr. Miles, are you saying then that I have to stop, put my hands together, close my eyes, and pray for 15 to 30 seconds every time I do anything, when I brush my teeth, when I wash my hands, when I get on my computer? That's crazy. No, that's not what I'm saying. Firstly, no, you don't have to say grace before you do literally anything. I just mean for the bigger, more important things. And secondly, like how I said originally, saying grace does not mean the way you do it with your family when you eat a meal. Saying grace just means acknowledging God's goodness and what he's done in your life. This could take 30 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. And you don't even have to close your eyes or bow your head to do it. You can just pray in your head right there and then, just really quick. And the thing is, by doing this, by starting it, whatever it is we're doing, by saying grace, we do 2 really, really awesome things. One, we're starting whatever it is we're doing on the best possible note and are setting ourselves up for success. And secondly, and most importantly, we are bringing ourselves nearer to God, which results in humbling us and also giving us hope for the future. So then, on the flip side of all of this, when we start doing things without saying grace, we're starting off on the wrong foot. We're starting without God's grace in mind, and thus start trying to do things without him at all, without his help, without God's guidance. We start getting entitled, we stop being humble, and we think that we deserve for things to go right for us all the time. And then also, when things don't go right, we only notice that. And we never notice the good things when they happen, and we start becoming discouraged and bitter. In short, when we don't start our important daily activities by saying grace to God, by acknowledging the good things he's done for us and continues to do in our lives, it becomes like almost as if that grace isn't even there in the first place. Because we're not allowing it to take root or take effect in our lives, and we're not noticing it in the places where it even is. And this is a very slippery slope, one that can lead to us being so far from God, not experiencing his grace at all. Now, speaking of slippery slopes, I know it might not be the biggest sport over here, but maybe before, when you've been watching the Olympics, you've seen this sport where four grown men or women will come together and get this big, huge metal sled, and they will push it down this slope, hop in, and then go zooming at highway speeds down and through this crazy course of ice. An actually seriously dangerous sport where they go at 150 kilometers an hour in a metal tub that is 500 pounds. Yes, this is the most serious adult version of sledding, known as bobsledding. Now, the goal of bobsledding is simple. It's just to get down to the finish line as fast as possible. So how does one do that, you may ask? What goes into a successful bobsled run? How do you do well at bobsledding and win? Is it being able to steer well in order to navigate all the sharp turns and slopes and not crashing, and make sure you take them very, very sharply, but not too sharp as to bump into the walls? Well, yeah, that's important, but no, it's actually not the most important key thing about winning a bobsled race. Okay, you might say, is it about having a team, a coordinated team who really knows the track and can work together, knows when the turns are coming, and can really come and work together? Yes, that's also very important, but no, it's not the most important thing and not the key factor in determining a good bobsled run. Okay. You might think, well, is it about the bobsled itself? Having one that's well built, has some really sharp skates on the bottom that were just sharpened, that has brakes that are quick and fast and really precise? Is that what winning a bobsled race is about? Is that how you do well? And I would say, yeah, that's also really, really important. But again, it's not the most important thing. It's not the key aspect of what it takes to win a bobsled race. So what then, you might ask? What does it take? What do you need to do in order to win a bobsled race? If you ask any professional, any really long-tenured bobsledder, they will tell you that while all of these other things are very important, what makes a winning bobsled run is all about the start, where they have the bobsled up on flat ice and they all need to wait for the buzzer and then push with all of their might, get it moving, and then all hop in like little cats agilely into the bobsled in order to go down. How fast you can do that and how well is what determines a good run. Because you can do all the... Again, the other factors are very important. You can definitely ruin a good run that started with a great start by taking a turn really poorly or crashing or whatever. But you can't have a good run without a good start. So now I have a question for you guys. I want to ask you, how are you starting? How are you starting the different important things that you're doing in your day, in your week, in your month, throughout this year, in this school year? It's really easy and tempting to just want to rush into things and get going and do them right away, not have to stop and wait and do it right. But we need to be willing to put those things on hold, stop, and start the right way by saying grace to God. Don't let yourself forget about all the good and amazing things that God has done for you. Don't start down the path that involves you trying to do everything yourself, you forgetting how much you need God to succeed. The truth is, though, that we all end up down that path from time to time. It's really easy to slip into a habit of forgetting to say grace to God, but that's okay. Just stop. Stop what you're doing, breathe, and look to God and say grace. And then start again. We all gotta do it. Because God's grace to us is the foundation of our faith. Our entire relationship with Him is built on it. We couldn't do anything for Him or for others or for ourselves if it were not for it. This grace, this gift we did not deserve, this perfect gift of eternity and life and forgiveness of sins, He gave to us who spat in His face, who literally deserved the exact opposite. This amazing grace that we have. This grace which we accept in the first place to start our faith is the grace we need to continually be acknowledging as we go on the journey of that faith. Every day, every week. We need to be keeping it at the forefront of our minds, to always be starting with saying grace, not to dwell on how imperfect we are or the bad things that we've done, because God has already forgiven and forgotten about those things. No, this is to remind us of how amazing and how good and loving God is. And when we can do this well, it results in us being near to Him, being close to His heart. It keeps us humble and reliant on Him, and helps us find the best way to start all the different things that we're doing in our life. So right now I want to challenge you guys to find 1 or 2 times throughout your day or throughout your week that you can now begin to start with by saying grace. Maybe before you hop on a Google Meet call, maybe before you go to bed, maybe when you wake up, maybe when you start doing an assignment, maybe when you start playing a video game, maybe when you take your dog for a walk. Whatever it might be, find 1 or 2 things that when you do them, before you start, you can say grace to God, acknowledge the good things He's done for you, and how grateful you are. It's that simple. And hey, a great way to do this is to use the stickers you may have gotten in your packages. See, I have one here in my water bottle to remind me when I go to take a sip of water, say grace. Not every time I take a sip of water, but just every now and again. Put it somewhere you'll see it so it can remind you to do this. Because guys, being super real, this really is so important. Just like when you and your family are all sitting down around the table and you want nothing more than to just eat your food, remember how important it is to stop, take a moment, and say grace. Thank you guys so much for listening to Chapel this week. I hope to see you all here next week, where we will talk about how we can show God's grace into the lives of others. I hope to see you all there.